You have implemented your CRM or about to go live with your CRM, and then what? So what's coming after that, and what are you going to use it for? What are the key challenges? That's what we are going to cover today in this webinar. My name is Thomas Wittig, and I will share some of my insights and practices and also some of the latest strategies and tactics that we are using for ourselves and, of course, when we are working and supporting with our clients. So without further ado, let's go into the topic today. First, I want to talk about some of the common challenges. Also, specifically, I want to talk about the mindset. I think when you are implementing a CRM, you need to adopt a different mindset. We'll talk a bit about demand generation and what you have available there. And also, where do your leads come from? The CRM is not doing any good if you're not collecting leads and converting them into deals, projects, transactions, orders, shipments, and so on. And I will also talk a bit about campaign optimization. What are the common pitfalls there and how can you overcome them? So first of all, what we see and what I certainly have seen in many CRM situations when we have been called into the game is that the company has implemented some tool or some CRM, and it could be anything. Like there are so many CRMs out there right now, including, of course, Zoho. That's the main topic that we want to talk about today, but also others like HubSpot, Salesforce, or even some lesser known CRMs such as Fluent CRM, which we have certainly gained some experience with in, let's say, SME-based projects. One key thing that I want to point out is that there seems to be some kind of spreadsheet mentality. People look at the CRM and they would say, okay, that's what I had before, right? So when I managed my customers on a spreadsheet, on Excel or Google worksheets or whatever, what's different now? And we need to overcome the spreadsheet mentality and really understand what is the tool really built for. A CRM certainly is not a spreadsheet. It's not a tool necessarily by itself or only a tool. And it's not what we would call a coherent system or a sales and marketing system. That is part of that system, but there's a little bit more required to that. The good news is, in most cases, you have already all the ingredients available. They're just not connected in most effective and most efficient way. If you are using the CRM like a spreadsheet to quote unquote administer your customer data, then you're already on the wrong track, or let's say you're at the very early stages of using a CRM effectively. No? It's almost like if you, let's say you have an iPad and you use it like a cutting board. That's not what it's made for. Or if you have a Ferrari and you try to plow through the fields, for example, that's also not what it's made for. And also, a tractor is not made for going on the highway, on the Autobahn at high speed. So then another key symptom that we find is there's a lack of a defined funnel and a conversion strategy and feedback loops. By funnel, we basically mean how do people come into your sales and marketing engine, and how do you engage and convert them? And about feedback loops, I have some recommendations what I would suggest that you implement. The feedback loops are really necessary to not treat the CRM as an isolated system, but making sure that others who are benefiting or depending on the CRM also get the important information. Then not a very favorite topic of many companies when we talk about privacy or privacy-led approaches, but you can certainly take this also to your advantage and we need to make sure that the data that we get into the CRM comes with some form of consent. We'll talk about that a little bit. But most of the time, what I have seen or heard people saying is, it's like building a house, right? So I wish we would have thought about this and that before we move in. Or now that I see the house, now I really know what I want. Now I really would like to build the next house or the next version of the house, because I know how things work, where I'd like to hang out. And literally, it's like the CRM. Where do you spend your time on the CRM? What should you be looking at? What's your daily routine, for example? So, by the way, the only recommendation I can make at this point in time, before you start implementing the CRM, take a stock and mental exercise about what are the key processes that you really want to implement. In any case, these issues typically point us to a lack of adoption, adherence to processes. So you don't have, let's say, repeatable processes that you can execute in again and again, but you have a variety, and that drives people crazy, including your customers and partners. And most importantly, you're losing traction, so you could get much more out of this. Now, the CRM implementation, it's typically considered as a sales-only implementation, where you have your sales data in, your leads, your deals, your pipeline data, your reports, etc. But it's really depending on the upstream functions in terms of, let's call it broadly, demand generation. Of course, here we mean marketing functions, and your marketing team may want to do some campaigns like multi-channel or multi-platform campaigns, full funnel campaigns, and somehow the leads, the customers coming from that, need to get into your CRM in a good way. And it usually should have some data associated with that, right? The worst practice is that marketing is throwing the leads over the fence, and then sales is trying to make sense out of it. This is not a good practice. But more downstream, we have, let's say, broadly the delivery function. So this includes project or service delivery. For example, if you're a software development company, you deliver projects or you deliver IT services. If you're in manufacturing, you are fulfilling orders. You are shipping finished goods, and so on and so on. And last but not least, accounting is important. Yeah, I think latest at that point you will realize that, well, maybe we should think about our sales process a little bit different, right? And for example, some of the key cornerstones here are how we're dealing with quotes, how we're dealing with sales orders and invoices. And the connection to the CRM is really important. So you really understand what's happening on a given customer, group of customers, in a territory, and so on. And this is important information. There are certainly really stunning and great ways to connect your CRM to the accounting system, and that provides much more transparency. Now, I mentioned a little bit the feedback loops. What I would suggest is that you actually implement those feedback loops. And you might wonder, okay, what does that mean? How do I do that? Simply establish a rhythm of the business, a cadence of reviews, for example, where sales and marketing teams together review lead quality. Okay, so what are the leads? How did they engage? How did we get some commercial value out of that? Or if a campaign is not producing any leads, what should we be doing to optimize it or change it to another campaign? Forecasting in terms of traffic, lead generation, the orders that are coming in and revenue. This is important information for readiness of production capacity, of workforce, and so on. And of course, in, let's say, broadly the delivery side of the house, we need to inform upstream our partners about the available capacity or capacity we will have available or idle capacity. as well as delivery delays. I think the delivery delays in combination with the capacity ramping up and down is one of the main causes of imbalances and sometimes even oscillation in business models. I've talked about that in different occasions and webinars. So if you're interested in that, please find some more content on our website. But also customer feedback is important. At the end of the day, you will have a customer who is using your product for their own benefit or selling it to their clients, and getting that customer feedback backwards into all the functions upstream is really important, because that's what's typically lacking. Marketing teams typically say, we don't know how the products are used. We don't know if the customers are satisfied. We don't know how our work contributes to the growth of the company, to the growth of the installed base, to what our customers are really trying to achieve. So establish these, and I think these rhythms already do wonders to many companies. Now, next point here, I would recommend use what you already have. And specifically, I would say try to use almost out of the box capabilities, practices, blueprints, and only if you really, really, really need something very special, which most of the time is not true for most companies, but if you use it, then customize it. I think then you will be better served in terms of adopting the platform updates more quickly. It's more future compatible, and you can actually most of the time move faster. There's nothing worse than something is holding you back in the past, where you have spent a lot of time and effort into some custom features, which in worst case, nobody's using. Now, I mentioned that I wanted to talk a little bit about the Zoho ecosystem, which we have come to appreciate a lot for our own purposes, and especially in our client projects. There are two flavors of the CRM. The enterprise version, typically Zoho CRM, and the sibling of that, I should say, Zoho Begin, which is really suitable for SME clients, even smaller clients who do not want and need to go through all the capabilities of a really large scalable CRM. Now, Begin is scalable and it connects to a lot of other platforms. So we talk about that a little bit here. Now, of course, once we have customer data in our CRM, we try to do something with it. We want to send them campaigns or get them into some kind of nurturing sequence. That's where tools such as Zoho Marketing Automation comes in, or Zoho Campaigns. Great tools, easy to use, easy to set up, and they really help you to warm up the leads, to start the engagement, build trusted relationships, typically before something happens on the commercial side. Now, the next question is, how do the leads come into the CRM? In the Zoho ecosystem, we typically use things like Zoho Webinar, like this webinar, for example, is delivered with Zoho Webinar. Zoho Survey, I would talk about that a little bit more in a special episode, but also very practically Zoho Forms. You could actually use any forms on your website, etc. I like Zoho Forms a lot because they help you capture the leads, and they deliver the data seamlessly into the CRM. Now, on the other side of the spectrum, we typically have websites. You may have a website maybe built on WordPress or custom built, some other framework. Wix has become very popular over the last 10 years, I would say. But also Zoho has a little bit lesser known capability. It's called Zoho Sites. It's part of the, for example, Zoho One Bundle. It's a great tool, and we have used it to set up, let's say, some satellite sites for us to test out what we actually recommend to our clients. A great tool. I would say the biggest benefit here is not only the integration, but also it's a little bit less to worry about. You basically build a site, and then you don't have to check on it every day like you would have to do in a WordPress environment, where you have to take care of updates and things and security almost every day. Now, between this and the next layer, I would say there are also specialty places or platforms that you might have. For example, a commerce site. I didn't mention it here, but in the WordPress ecosystem, typically we find WooCommerce, for example, or other let's say commerce solutions. A lot of people are using Shopify, that's for sure, but also there's a new kid on the block, Zoho Commerce. It's a fully fleshed out e-commerce solution, just went through a major upgrade. So if you haven't looked into that, I would suggest to check it out. We have become more interested also in using Zoho landing pages. Landing pages, also known as sales pages or sometimes called squeeze pages, are basically standalone pages where you would send traffic to from a campaign. For example, to have people sign up for a trial, get some kind of a lead magnet, or sign up for an event, for example. It's a great way not only to capture leads, but also to enrich it with your analytics and get the leads right into the CRM. Now, if you are a Zoho One customer, or maybe even a Zoho Marketing Plus customer, you have most of the tools available. But oftentimes we cannot see the forest for the trees, so to speak. And the question is, how do you connect them logically in some kind of sequence? That's what we typically encounter in our projects. And we do have companies of, let's say, the small and medium enterprise, but also large enterprise markets to get the most out of their implementations. Now, specifically, I want to talk here about one key capability, which is fairly new at this point in time, and it's called Zoho Lead Chain. What we typically encounter as a problem is, how do you get, for example, data from your advertisement campaigns in a good way into your CRM? And more importantly, how do you inform the campaign of what is happening downstream? That's where Zoho Lead Chain is coming in. On one hand, it's a part of the CRM. On the other hand, it's also related to your platforms. For example, let's say you are a B2B company running ads on LinkedIn or Google Ads. Same applies, by the way, for Meta ads, Facebook ads, or TikTok. So there's also a connection to that. But let's say here in LinkedIn and Google Ads, what you would find on the platform are lead forms. So here are two examples from our recent campaigns. One is coming from a campaign where we were talking about digital marketing strategy. Another campaign was about our management simulations. And these are great ways where customers can get into direct contact with us. And you have the same on the Google Ads side. On the Google Ads, it's called an asset, and a form is a campaign asset that the Google algorithm is showing to customers in an automated way. So if it figures out there's a high probability that this customer would respond to this asset, they will show it in the campaign. You don't have to do anything. You just have to create the asset. But what's more important, you have to also make the connection to the CRM. That's where Lead Chain is coming in. So in Lead Chain, you take the forms and you basically map the fields of, for example, name, company, whatever you set up there, and you map that correctly to the CRM. So you have the data quality already squared away. Now, the other important thing that I mentioned, it creates this feedback loop of data flowing back to the platforms. If you want that, it's not necessary, but I think it's a good practice. Why? Because it informs the algorithms what is happening downstream. So if you find a lead which turns into a deal, for example, that may be counted as a conversion. And if the algorithm, the advertising algorithm, is informed with that information, with that data point, it can optimize better. There is a manual way to do that. You would basically download your data from the CRM and then upload it to the platform. That in some way can also be automated, for example, as a scheduled transport, for example, scheduled output in a very simple CSV file. You could use another tool like an if this then that tool like Zapier, for example. I increasingly like this combination because it's also something that is highly scalable and repeatable. So if you haven't checked it out, take a look at it. If you need some information, please get in touch with us. One topic I have talked about in a previous session like this is about campaign performance. To put it up front, what I would recommend, the key point here is try to avoid the kids in the candy store attitude and try to avoid the campaign of the day, the campaign of the week. The reason why I'm saying that is a campaign has a life cycle and it needs to evolve over time. Often what we find is customers come to us and they say, okay, we have tried almost everything, but it doesn't work. Well, what are we doing? And one of the common mistakes is that they basically try something, they see if it's working for a couple of days, 3, 4, 5 days. That's why I call it the campaign of the week, right? And at the after 3 days, they see, for example, that the cost per conversion is going through the roof. Of course, because the algorithm is just entering the machine learning period, which takes some time. That depends on the volume that you're driving with the campaign. But typically, the rule of thumb is if you're somewhere between 50 to 100 conversion signals, the campaign will then reach some form of cruising altitude and adjust, and your campaign performance starts improving. So one way, of course, to look into this is to take a look at the campaign details. Not everybody is familiar with how to look at campaign data. What we also increasingly appreciate is the tool like Zoho Analytics, for example, where we can combine campaign data together. So here's an example. We can add a forecast to it. That's something we're testing out right now, if this really makes sense, because it's quite complex to make a forecast. But here on this picture, you see what's called a probabilistic forecast. So it gives you a range of potential outcomes for your click flow, your leads. But also what's pretty cool is that Zoho's own implementation inside the system, it's called Zia. Zia is an AI, and you can use it actually to generate a narrative, so that you better understand what are we looking at here. So what does it mean? How does the click flow relate to the impressions, etc., etc.? And this can be more or less verbose, so you can play with that a little bit. Great tool. I absolutely recommend that. We typically put together a very concise dashboard for decision makers, because they typically ask us the same question every week at least, right? Where do we stand? How is the campaign performing? Some client actually say, I want to see this line again. And that's basically what they mean is the line chart to see if the campaign is getting traction, how they're spending the money, etc. So there's a blog post about this topic. Actually take a look at that. And if you have questions, get in touch. Now, what are good problems to have when you implement a CRM? And I call this the positive friction. The good problem reads like this. So marketing should cause problems for sales, should cause good problems for delivery, should cause good problems for finance and administration, should cause good problems for HR. A good problem, for example, is, oh my goodness, we have an increased inflow of leads, no? And you can see people in downstream delivery already getting nervous. No? What does it mean? Do we have more capacity? Do I need to produce more finished goods? Do I need to have more people to deliver the projects? It just takes one major project in an IT company, and your workforce planning is going into a certain phase of imbalances until you have reached cruising altitude. This is what is causing typically problems. But again, we would like to cause these good problems and create this positive frictions. No? Now, there are many things to say about this, but you may want to consider let's say some KPIs and a special dashboard for that to understand what are the leads per source, what's your ratio of marketing qualified leads to sales qualified leads, what is the sales cycle. Typically, we are too optimistic with the sales cycle. The common question I get is, how long should the nurturing sequence be? Short answer is, you need to align it with your sales cycle. If your sales cycle is 180 days, then typically 5 emails over, let's say, 2 months is not doing much. No? You have to stay top of mind. You have to be helpful. So when the customer is ready with a purchase intent, then you need to be top of mind of that customer. And that's where the CRM and all these tools help you to take the guesswork out of the equation, to take the manual work out of the equation. You just have to set it up and monitor and refine. Okay. So again, one of the unfavorable topics that I typically have to deal with is privacy. Now, since when did GDPR launch in 2018? So it's quite some time ago, but it's still there and it doesn't go away. Since then, companies are worrying how to be and remain compliant. In your CRM, you may find something like this. This is a screenshot from the Zoho CRM. Sure, you can find it in some way or form in your own CRM. And typically what you see here is a section about data privacy, and there's not much in there. So what it should look like is something like this, where you have obtained consent, and that means that you can reach out to the customer for the purpose that they have indicated they have given consent. Now, in this case, it's very clear we can use this customer for email communication, for phone, for survey, and it actually gives you some information when the lead was generated. What I'm not showing here is the history, but if you would click here, it gives you a complete timeline, an audit trail. That's important in case you are running into issue and the customer might say, okay, why are you bombarding me with emails? Have I ever given you consent? Show me what you have in terms of data. And it's then good to have a coherent, consistent audit trail. Okay. Now, more importantly, under GDPR regulations, and that is pretty much true under all the other regulations like LGPD in Brazil, like the California Consumer Protection Act, and many others. You can only use customer data if you have consent. And many people say, okay, but that's not true for B2B. I just can, let's say, take B2B information and send email. Well, I'm not giving you a legal advice here, but you may want to double check with your data privacy officer or your attorney of choice. My interpretation is consent is required, and we better do a good job in managing that consent. And then you can use your data for the purpose that you have consent collected, for example, for creating audiences, for marketing campaigns, etc. All right. There is something else in your CRM that you may have not paid attention to, but I would like to draw the attention to that. And for example, if you are running a Google AdWords campaign with consent, etc., you can collect information from that campaign. For example, the keyword that the client has responded to, the type of device, click, ad network, the campaign, the ad group, the click data, maybe even the cost per click. Now, this is not to basically do the math here on the cost per click, but this is a great basis for having an informed strategy and operational dialogue about lead quality, because you can use that information to slice and dice the data and figure out which campaigns have driven poor quality leads and which ad groups, for example, have contributed to high quality leads. This is really important. This is one of the things where, remember what I said at the beginning, where people say, okay, I moved into the house, now I really know what the house should look like, right? This is one of the things that you should actually implement early so that you have the benefit of this information downstream as you are getting more into the groove of working with your sales and marketing engine. All right, to wrap it up, and then I will point to more resources very quickly. Use what you have already and try to make more sense out of it, connect it in a more effective way. Use out-of-the-box capabilities, functionality first before you do any customizations. Customizations are great, don't get me wrong, but they can also be pain points down the road. Then engage using what you have and engage in test-driven, data-supported campaigns. I know it's hard to keep up with all the things that are happening in the marketing world. You may not even be interested in that. We do this for a living for our customers. So if you need support with that, we'd be happy to support you in any ways, regardless if you're a CRM customer or a partner who wants to make sure that their customers is having basically good effective use of the campaign. Now, this points us to what the CRM really should be used for. It's not like a spreadsheet. It's not a cutting board like I explained it. It's an integrated sales and marketing engine. That's how we should think about the CRM and the tools that are around the CRM and help us manage this. Now, if you would like to get started, we have prepared and are preparing and refining what we call the Digital Growth Kickstart Kit. So if you're interested, scan the code here or go to this landing page, and it includes some recipes and examples of how you could use a tool like Zoho CRM. If you want to make more sense out of your Zoho One bundle, out of your Zoho Marketing Plus bundle, and so on. This is a great starting point. And also feel free to book a first strategy session to have a discussion about, what are your requirements? What are you trying to get? What are your pain points? And how could you get into a more fruitful, effective use with that? We'd be happy to work with you. So contact us on wittigonia.net or on our website. And this is basically what we do for a living. So with this, I want to conclude for today. We have covered a lot of topics. I know there's much to digest here. If you would like to have a discussion about your particular situation, please feel free to reach out. We're here to help. For those of you who are attending the Zoholics conferences as customers, as partners, developers, talents, I would love to have a discussion with you in how we work together. We are a big fan of this ecosystem, and we have started already working with partners. And maybe you want to have a talk about that, so feel free to reach out. And we'd be happy to discuss how you can create your tomorrow starting today. With that, I wish you good luck.